the first meeting of the morning with Professor Marcia Soares from UFMG, who is going to talk on both residual formula on polyphons.
Well, I wish to thank the scientific committee for inviting me, and it's a real pleasure here, especially because of Beckett. As you can see, the title has only classical subjects involved, because Bode's formula is classical. The residue is the Grothendieck-Point residue, which is classical. And orbifolds, well, were introduced by Satake, and this is also classical. But nowadays, everything in mathematics that is at least 10 years old is called classical. And so Beckett, I guess you became classical. Okay. Let us.
You too, Marcel.
Oh, I'm not classical then. Well, I'll just, I must excuse for people who know this already. This will be a bit tiring, but I'll just briefly recall orbifolds, which is, well, it's, you take a complex space, well, a decent complex space, and what you do is, at each point of it, you can find a neighborhood, which is a quotient. Well, where this V is a manifold, and G is a finite subgroup of the group of the homomorphism. And of course, V and G, especially G, depend on the point in this complex space. And so that's the basic idea of an orbifold. And just to tell, these morphics or orbifolds are holomorphic maps between them. We're just considering complex orbifolds. Okay, so they are very nice objects, because the singularities, they are quotient singularities. And so X is reduced to normal Cohen-Macaulay, and that with only rational singularities. Well, the singular set is what is not in the regular part, and the dimension of the orbifold is the dimension of the complex manifold, which is the regular part. Well, that's another classical result. It was done by Creel a long time ago, I think about 30 years ago, where he characterized the local structure. If you take a manifold of dimension n, but it doesn't matter the dimension there, the dimension will always be there here, then every quotient germ becomes a unique small finite group in GLN. This is a consequence of an old theorem by Chevalier, which says that if you have this finite group of automorphism or parallelomorphism, then it's linearizable, the action. And so you can reduce to some action of a subgroup of GLN. And we can always identify the manifold above because everything is local with Cn around the germ. We have this projection, it's called a local smoothing covering, And well, singular points arise precisely when the isotropic group is non-trivial. Also, another point there, I believe this comes from Montfort, is that Gx is isomorphic to the fundamental group of the complement of the singularities in the local state of X. And sometimes Gx is referred to the local fundamental group of X at the moment. But this is just a definition of small group. It doesn't matter. Well, Sartakis constructed this, was the first one to construct this object. And he called them V-manifolds. Later, Thurston rediscovered them, and as far as I know, he asked his students how to call them. And the students chose the name Omnifort. And that's the name we have today. And, but everything goes really fine on this object because we have, and that's always the basic idea. What is a differential form? Big and wonderful. If you have a smooth form on the regular part, then you take its feedback to y. So you have the problem around x, and which is displayed, which is y. And if you can extend smoothly this feedback to the whole of y, then you have what is called a differential form now, and a smooth form. So that's always the idea. You have something around the singularity, you pull it back, you get in a smooth situation, and you try to extend it. I'll give examples for this later, and just to make something is clear here. It's very natural to compensate if you want to integrate the differential form. That's a special case. It's the support of the form is only this trivializing label, x, of the form x. If you want to integrate it, you must compensate by the order of the group Gx, which is just the degree of what sort of a degree of pi m. Well, everything works nice as in the manifold case. We have the sheaf of infinite forms, we have exterior differentiation, Stokes holds, one Galilean duality holds, same way, and the Herms theorem also holds, as well as the isomorphism with such cohomology. Here we are taking always singular cohomology. So that's the basic thing about orbitals. I'll skip this. This is technical. And just give a definition. Well, if you have an orbital, you do what is, say, obvious, you go up the singular set. And you keep doing going up until you reach a situation where you get a resolution. And we say a resolution is good. Say E is the exceptional divisor of this resolution. It has only normal crossings. And in case X has only isolated singularities, this is the case that will interest us. The singularities of X will be isolated. When they are non-isolated, there are some problems I cannot deal with now. It's a very interesting thing to study. the case of non-isolated singularity. But I can't define properly the represent. And in case it has only isolated singularities, what we demand is that the mode-down or the exceptional divisor is precisely the singular set of x. Is this to avoid fake divisors, things which are uninteresting and mean nothing. Okay. Now what I'm trying to do now is develop channel classes for these objects. And what is important here is this definition of V3. You take a sheaf. We are talking here about the germ of X, that we call X, and then you take a sheaf there, and we say it is V3. If, forget about the second condition, but to get an idea, it's just this. It is reflexive. That is, it is isomorphic to its bidual. And when you pull back the sheaf and take its bidual, then it is a free sheaf. Well, this means that that's quite useful for working foliations. I mean, it's saturated. The idea of taking biduals is to saturate, is to not leave anything out, to get everything there. And so then that's a very nice condition. And well, a sheaf on a non-default is locally free if when restricted to each of those trivializing. Whoops.
What is V?
What is V? This thing here.
What is the definition of V3?
Locally V3.
It's the name because Satake called it V-manifolds. So I refer to it as a V-free sheaf, just to say that's not free as a usual sheaf. It's in this sense. I'm sorry about that. Because I tried to write V-manifolds, but everybody told me V-manifolds, nobody uses this anymore after Thursday. It's awful. It's too classical to be remembered.
So the V stands for Satake.
Yes, the V comes from Satake. And one of the essential things is this reflexive. And now we can define V bundles, which is holomorphic bundles from non-default. What is this? Vector bundles. Here we only deal with vector bundles. It's on the regular part of the non-default you have a holomorphic vector bundle, but then you have this patching condition, this compatibility, the inclusion of the sheaf of sections gives you a locally free sheaf. This is the minimal condition to get things working. And it's not too restrictive. Of course, there are some restrictions there, but it's not too restrictive. And that's just to try to explain this a bit. If you have a holomorphic bundle on the regular part, and how do you get the holomorphic bundle on the whole of it? You take any local smooth covering, you must be able to find a vector bundle there, a holomorphic vector bundle, on the smoothing covering, such that you have an action of Gx on this vector bundle, but an action outside the fixed point of the isotropic group. such that when you take the quotient by Gx, you retrieve the original vector bundle downstairs. So that's it's just a condition. Why is this condition interesting? Because of this property here, that if we have a locally different sheaf, you can associate to it a V bundle, which is, for which S is the sheaf of sections. So you can associate to a sheaf a vector bundle. That's what we will need. And finally, for the Chern classes, we use the Chern-Bayes procedure. I'll do it for metric connections. You can skip the metric there, but it doesn't matter because we will have to work by choosing metrics everywhere. And it saves time doing it this way. So the usual thing is the same way of thinking. To put a V metric on S, what we do is to take a Hermitian metric on the regular part of it and pull back and see if this metric admits an extension to a Hermitian metric of the lifted on the vector bundle above. Well, you can put metrics there because partition of unity works on all defaults. And if you have a non-default value of dimension n, a locally different sheaf of say rank R, and we put a metric on S, then we can construct these classes as usual. And how you build them, you take on the regular part the metric connection, take its curvature operator, then this is represented by another matrix of two forms called this theta H, that is also mainly local trivialization. You take Ci, the ith elementary symmetric invariant polynomial, and then you do as Chern did, take this polynomial acting on this matrix, and define this as the ith Chern class. Well, in principle, this is just defined on the regular part of the multiple, but it's not difficult to see that because the metric you chose extends above, in fact, they form a section of the sheaf E2 line, differential form of the E2 line. And as in the infinity case, they are exact. And when you look at them in their homology, they do not depend on the metric. Now the tangent sheaf of a non-default X, since it is a quotient, locally obtained as quotient of a manifold by a very special group, and a group, it is born reflexive. Already, it's automatically reflexive. And as usual, we define the ith Chern class of X as the ith Chern class of its tangent sheaf. And if you restrict it to the regular part of X, you just obtain the homologic tangent sheaf of the complex manifold X prime. Now, if you look at the axioms of Grothendieck defining Chern classes, here we must have to take some care about the Whitney formula. And we must impose this condition. So we say that the sequence of locally different sheaves is exact, the exact, provided, you pull back all the elements in the sequence, you bidualize them, take the biduals, then you get this sequence, and this sequence must be exact. If this holds, then we say that the sequence of sheaves is exact. And then we have the properties of the gem classes as usual. The rank determines the vanishing, everything above the rank vanishes. We have this relation between the classes of S and of the dual, which they sum works, provided this sequence is exact, the exact. That's why we give that condition, otherwise it doesn't hold. And for tensor products, it's the same formula as usual. So in particular, if this S and L are reflexive, we can forget about the double dual, and we get the usual tensor formula for the tensor product of the sheaves. And now the other thing which is natural here, I won't talk much about it, is that these are rational classes. And the rational comes from the simple fact that we are taking quotients singularity. They are rational. They are finite groups. In the end, we are dividing by the order of these groups. Now, Raimund Glascher, in a very interesting paper, he developed, he proved a version for all defaults for the Insebrun-Riemann theorem in this paper. And to do so, he needed the concept of local channel class. And this local channel class he defined is useful to us because I'll say it measures the difference between Pokarevov indices. So just to describe them briefly, we must calculate the resolutions. You take a good resolution of an isolated quotient singularity. You take above, from next tilde, a locally free sheaf such that when you blow it down, it takes the bidual, you get a free sheaf on X. Don't forget about these technical conditions. You just think that you have neighborhoods of the point X. You have a neighborhood U and a neighborhood W, which is a bit larger. And the point to be a good representative is simply that you have retractions of these neighborhoods onto the point. But in this case, you can build matrix. So you have this, you have the point, you have the small neighborhood U, you have the bigger neighborhood W. You forget what it is in U, and in the orbifold and above, you take the same matrix, you take the corresponding gem classes over W and over W tilde, which is the lifted rate. The gem forms are there. And then you define this local gem class as the difference. So here is something we have done on the orbifold, and here is something we have above on the resolution. And this is what is called the V here is the exceptional divisor. We have this resolution, a good resolution. This is the local gem class of the. First, here you can see they localize at the point X, because what we do is to shrink U and U theta. And we see that everything is concentrated at the point X and Y, which is above it by the projection. And it gives a relation between jet numbers, which is this one. If you have a jet number on the orbifold, you take the corresponding thing on the lifted situation, and the difference between them and the excess you get in the smooth situation is simply the sum of these local jet numbers. You see here is some just open the singularities of X. Okay. Now we are ready to go to Brooks formula. I'm not talking about K theory here, not about the Rotary group, because there is a K theory developed by one, the chain, and it doesn't work quite well for virtual bundles. So never mind what a virtual bundle is, we just define this thing here to be this class. And then we bring in quasi-homogeneity. So C mu is simply this. Mu is this n-tuple. Is simply this product here of these classes. And they have weights. And the sum of the weights must be n. That is, they are quasi-homogeneous of degree n with weights 2 by n. And capital C mu is simply this product here, but with a product for invariant polynomial of degree n. In this quasi-homogeneous sense. And then that's for this formula. You have a compact orbifold of direction n with only isolated singularities. You take a line V bundle over X and take psi, a holomorphic section of Tx twisted by L with only isolated singularities. Assume it exists. Later I'll give you an example that you must have some other things for existence of such a section apart from the trivial section. And then everything goes as before in the usual Bose form. This J number is simply the sum of these residues. I mean, you take the section, you lift it by a local smooth recovery. Up there you take its Jacobian matrix, and you calculate this residue here, the Rotary residue at the point between them. Then you get a number, and then you divide by the order of the isotropy group of P, and you sum this thing. And you have this global relation here, it gives a J number of the orbifold. Well, I'll very briefly say how one proves this. This is technical. Well, the proof here is actually half of it is following Satake and Sherring's argument. And well, the first thing to do is to put metrics. So we have metrics. And then, once we have a region metric, you have a leak connection whose matrix is given by this object here.
Excuse me, actually, the vector field has isolated singularities too. See, the vector,
Yes.
isolated singularities.
Yes. That was it. Well, the non-isolated zero can If the zeros don't go through the singularities, it's like the smooth plates. You do a small perturbation, they vanish, you get only isolated singularities. If they go to the singularities, non-isolated vector pairs to the singularity, one must be more careful. That's whoops. So that's the matrix connection. The curvature matrix is given by the structure equation. Is D'Alembert omega. Here it is. And for the line bound, we take an Hermitian matrix there. That's the curvature form. And we write it this way. Twisted by this side K here, that is forms. This was done by Schermer. And Schermer, here you see actually Schermer's in his full capacity working. It's fantastic. This is a sort of a torsion on the curvature. He put this torsion on the curvature that turned everything simpler. And so you take this form. The omega ij here comes from the curvature of the tangent bundle, and these are this sort of a twisted curvature from the line bundle. You take this matrix omega 2, looking like this. Well, any invariant polynomial is a linear combination of the elementary symmetric functions. And here comes the magic. You see, we are walking upstairs in this smooth situation. But whenever you have two, whenever you have an overlap above, the matrices, they don't depend on them. You apply the polynomial, you get this identity. They don't depend on the coordinates you chose. And so, here's the good thing. They define a global NM form on X because we can extend it everywhere because above they coincide. And that's the same argument Chern used and Sataki used. Sataki proved the Gauss-Fourier theorem for all folds. And well, it's most similar to this. This is a bit more involved. And the trick why Chern involved that twisted curvature, that like torsion part of the curvature, is to get this identity for any invariant polynomial. And it can be proved, the localization is here, that outside the zeros of the section, this form is exact. Where psi is an n minus 1 form outside the zeros of the section. And you take this class in the hand, this is precisely the class defined by this invariant polynomial. So what we must do to find this right-hand side is to calculate the left-hand side. Now this form psi here, how do we get that? Well, that's the local expression of the vector field or of the section. Above, we are above. And at each zero, we choose the standard Hermitian matrix. So the curvatures vanish and everything is easier to calculate and build them by a partition of unity. And with this choice of matrix, we have a dual form to this section, which is this form here, eta alpha. And the fantastic thing is that this matrix, the form psi, which is this everything is this form psi here, which gives you the outside of the zeros. This form psi has an explicit form. So this is the dual form of the section. Here is just P calculated on the Jacobian of the section. Then of course there is some factor that corrects everything. And we do this calculation because we have the explicit form for beta alpha. And we arrive at this. And by doing this, that's a good thing. You look at it and you look at the Born-Martinelli kernel. The Born-Martinelli kernel is simply a generalization of the Cauchy kernel. And the Born-Martinelli kernel is this, and there is this relation. This relation, as I know, was proved by Griffiths. I don't know if someone proved it before, but I know it from Griffiths. And the map phi is this map here. And if you do everything explicitly, you get that the pullback of the Born-Martinelli kernel is precisely this thing here where that form psi enters up to the polynomial. So what we do now is at each zero on the particle below, because the form psi we have defined below on the particle, you choose a small ball and then simply use Stokes. We want to calculate this, and then we take out the union of this ball, so we are on the regular part. We report that this is precisely this number times deep psi. And then we use Stokes to get to the boundaries of the balls. The minus here comes from the rotation. And here we just have to integrate psi. And we do this calculation to get this thing here. It's just the sum of one over the order of the groups at each sphere. But we can calculate this integral because we know that pi star alpha of psi is this. And this is precisely this number times the Born-Martinelli kernel, and this times the Born-Martinelli kernel gives you precisely the residue. So that's where you get the proof. Now I'll give the idea of how the local Chern classes work. Satakis defined the Bogaryov index of a zero E on the orbifold. What you do is you lift the section, you look at the point P tilde, you calculate the Bogaryov index at P tilde, and then you scale by 1 over the order of the group.
Like a rational number.
Yes, it's usually, it's Russian. Everything here are Q bundles at this point, but I'm not talking about Q bundles. Everything is Russian. And, well, for in the usual situation, the smooth base for a manifold, the Bogaryov index is the residue associated to that determinant. And the theorem we get is this. You take a resolution, I put the resolution of X, E is the exception of the visor, psi a holomorphic section with only isolated zeros. We must assume this, that the pullback of this locally free sheaf is locally free. And then the sum of the Bogaryov index is the difference of these two Chern numbers. Here is the Chern number on X tilde, and here we have we must compensate. The excess here is given by the sum of the local Chern numbers on the singular points of the point field. And in particular, if you assume that this thing here is reflexive, So we can forget about this double zero sign here. We simply get that this gives us condition, in the end a condition for a section to have a singularity at the singularity of the orbifold. Because here we are counting out the zeros of the section which lie on the singular set of the orbifold, and this is given by the sum of the Poincaré of indexes along the exceptional divisors minus this contribution from the singular set of x given by these J classes. And I'll just give briefly two applications of this. Well, everybody knows this is the weighted projective space. You take this action, C star action, so you have these weights there, and you take the quotient. Here we impose the condition that the weights here are 2 by 2 co-prime, so that adjunction formula holds. We need adjunction formula, otherwise we may get surprises. But for well-formed projective spaces, I just recall that the abelian here comes from in this case, the groups are abelian, they are isomorphic to the groups of W's are roots of unity, so they are very nice. And the singularities of this orbifold depends, of course, on W and Wn. If they are bigger than 1, are these points. And we have this canonical projection, which is the moment to the quotient, and we have this natural map from the projective n space into the weighted projective n space. And this map has degree the product of the double ends, and this map is good, genuine, because one thing that happens with orbifolds is when you take pullbacks of bundles by them, you may have something which is not at all a vector one. I mean, it's not a vector. There are places there where it doesn't behave well. But the map is good when this happens. The bundles behave well on the pullback. So we have V bundles here, we can pull back by this map 5W, and you'll get a bundle there. And so with these we can construct a V bundle, a line V bundle on the weighted projective space whose pullback is the hyperplane bundle on Vn. And by naturality, the map is good. You have naturality. You just pull it out. And we calculate this geometry. The C1 to the end of Pn, this number is 1 divided by the product. And as usual, Pn twisted, we twisted d times. Now we must have a condition for the existence of sections. If we twist by OPWN to d minus 1, we must demand that d is bigger than this number for d to have non-trivial sections. This is not well written because what I mean by non-void is a section which is non-trivial. So this d could be negative. And so a foliation on Pn is defined by a quasi-homogeneous vector field, and Once we have a vector field like this, if we add a multiple of the twisted radial vector field, the weighted radial vector field will define the same foliation on EMW, and this number d here is what we call the degree of the foliation. And here you have just an enumerative result that counts the number of singularities of a foliation of degree d on EMW, and it's given by this. I mean, here I'm not counting multiplicities. If all the Poincare-Hopf indices are 1, then okay. It's just counting the number of singularities, but here you count them with multiplicities, and in the end, you have this number. What is this useful for? Because of this thing here. Say it's just an example. The point is that any foliation on EMW must have a singular set if d is greater than or equal to 1, or d greater than or equal to 0 in the case of dimension 2. And also, whenever the case, the singular set is only empty if d minus 1 divides, that's the product of the values. And another example, quite briefly, is to give the Hitzebro surfaces as good resolutions of a weighted projective space. Well, the Hitzebro surfaces are sigma k, k is greater than or equal to 0, never mind what they are. They are defined by this, is the projectivization of OP1 plus OP1k, and Matsuzawa gave a very convenient realization of the Hitzebro surfaces. Here you can see immediately that if k equals 1, what we are doing is taking P2 and blowing up P2 at one point. And we know everything about the Hitzebro surfaces. We have this special divisor here, which is the only divisor which has self-intersection minus k. And we know its Picard group, which is this, where d is this divisor and L is a generic ladder with dl equals 1 and self-intersection number 0 here for L. Now let us look at these orbifolds. The weights here are 1, 1, and k. Okay, greater than or equal to 1. If k equals 1, this is just P2. So never mind, so we take k bigger than 1. So we have a singular point here. And what we do is to consider the blow-up of this space at the singular point. And we have this map phi here, which gives an isomorphism from the Hitzebro surface, except the divisor d, the negative, the divisor intersection minus k, with dk minus d2, which is that is pk minus 2. So here is pk2, not pk. It's this. And so this composite, where this is the first projection, gives a good resolution of this weighted projective space, and the exceptional divisor is that special divisor d on the Hitzebro surface. And we have this comparison. If we take a section, an isolated, a foliation with isolated zeros on d to k of degree d, and the Poincare-Hopf index at the singular point of the space, if we take the sum on the divisor in the Hitzebro surface of the lifted section, we subtract the Poincare-Hopf. And what is good for? Simply because it gives you a condition, it's an example of a condition that forces a foliation to have a singularity at a singularity of the orbifold. Because you may have a singularity of the orbifold, but a foliation which is non-singular there. Because what you do, you have the local vector field downstairs, and here you have the singularity of the orbifold. You lift it. So you are in a smooth situation. Here you have a vector field. This vector field may extend without being zero in the point above. Brunella remarked this in one of his papers. He didn't give examples, but here you can produce examples with this. And well, that was it. I'm sorry. I didn't do this.
Well, we thank Professor Marcio Soares for his nice talk, talking about classic matters. So is there any question?
So if I'm one way to understand this, so you take the orbifold X when an appropriate line bundle L, you're twisting the tangent
The tangent bundle.
tangent the bundle, and somehow what you're doing is taking a localization of the top chain class
Yes.
at the singular set. Can you do that for other chain numbers?
Ah, yes. For the top chain numbers, yes. For the others, that's what is missing. Because you see, it would be a number theory there. And I don't know if the residue exists. In this case, the residue is quite simple because the orbifold is quite simple. And it's point residues. But in the general case, I don't know if an orbifold has non-isolated singularities. Maybe I should try to work with some toric varieties with non-singular. Exactly, see what happens there. Toric non-varieties to produce example. But I don't know how to define them. But perhaps you, Jean-Paul, and Tatsuo, because you have some, this idea of comparing Poincaré of indices. You did this in some situations, and I mean, these local chain classes must be involved there somewhere. So probably we have something quite similar to this situation.
So my other question was in that direction. If you know how this relates, for instance, to the Schwarz-McPherson classes of the orbifold. Okay, that'd be interesting. Thanks.
Very nice to know.
Yeah.
But you know this better than I do.
I know that side better than you, but not this side.
Any other question?
How do you define a connection in the singular part of the orbifold?
No, it's the same thing, the connection. What you have is you iterate the curvature operator. So you get a matrix of two forms. You have the connection form, it's a matrix of forms, you have the structural equation. For the curvature, you get the matrix of two forms. But anyway, you have this. You have this matrix of one form. If this extends, it is defined. The point is to extend it to a singular point. You pull it back, and then you look at the point. If it extends there, then it's well defined. And this happened in this case That's what Satake did to prove the Gauss-Borel theorem. He extended all these connections. This is very nice in the paper of Satake, which is in the, I think it's the National Academy of Sciences, many, many years ago. But I was already born, so.
Thanks.
Not so many years.
Any other question? Okay, please, ask again.